This really happened, or so I believe, because even now it feels like a dream too intense to be real. I've changed the names for privacy, but everything else is as I remember it. I never imagined that a simple, fleeting exchange of glances, almost an accidental crossing of eyes, would turn my life upside down in a matter of days. That moment, an almost casual stare in a bustling courtyard in New Delhi, sparked a desire so overwhelming that, at times, I questioned my own sanity. Before I continue, let me introduce myself. My name is, well, let's call me, Ethan. I was born and raised in a small town in the United States, in a place where farmland stretched on for miles, and big city lights were only something I saw in movies or TV. As a teenager, I dreamed of distant horizons and exotic cultures, devouring every travel book I could find. I used to sneak out late at night to watch planes cross the sky, imagining I was on one of them, heading anywhere but home. Eventually, I left for college, got a job with a tech startup, and found the chance to travel the world. Yet nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared me for what would happen in India. It was mid-autumn when my boss sent me on a 2-week trip to New Delhi to set up a potential partnership with a local company. I was excited, but also a bit uneasy, about landing in such a vibrant, overwhelming city. India had always fascinated me, the fusion of ancient traditions and modern hustle, the colorful festivals, the flavors that seemed to burst from every corner. However, I knew little of the social norms or cultural etiquette beyond what I'd read and seen online. The moment I stepped off the plane, I was greeted by a rush of humid air scented with incense, chai, and 1,000 other aromas I couldn't name. Even that first breath of Indian air felt like stepping into a completely different world. I checked into a historic hotel in the heart of the city, near old Mughal architecture, where the walls seemed to whisper stories of centuries past. Despite my jet lag, I felt an urge to explore, so I took a quick shower and headed downstairs. The lobby was a masterpiece of marble floors, hanging lanterns, and intricately carved furniture. I remember wearing a simple white shirt and khaki pants, feeling slightly underdressed in comparison to the elegant surroundings. That was when I first saw him. He was standing by the reception desk, speaking quietly to one of the staff members. His posture was poised yet relaxed. He wore a tailored kurta with subtle golden embroidery, and my first thought was how regal he looked, as if he belonged to a lineage of ancient royalty. He must have sensed my gaze because he turned and our eyes locked, just for an instant. But in that moment, I felt the ground shift under me. His eyes were warm yet guarded, as if they carried a secret he wasn't sure he wanted to reveal. My heart gave a small, inexplicable jolt. I walked toward the concierge to ask about places to visit that evening. The man had already stepped aside, so we ended up inches apart in the crowded lobby. At close range, I noticed how his skin seemed to glow under the warm lighting, and how his dark hair framed a face of refined features. He inclined his head slightly to let me pass. I mumbled a polite "thank you," but my voice betrayed my nerves. He offered a faint, courteous smile. I never caught his name. I wasn't even sure I'd see him again. That evening, I found a small courtyard cafe known for its live music. I was enthralled by the flavors, spicy curries, fresh naan, and sweet lassi. A local tabla player was setting a mesmerizing rhythm, and I let the music wash over me. Despite the beauty around me, my mind kept drifting back to that stranger. Something about him had sparked a curiosity that refused to fade. The next day, I attended meetings at the local partner's office, corporate discussions in air-conditioned conference rooms, accompanied by endless cups of masala chai. My Indian colleagues were warm and welcoming, but I struggled with the thick swirl of cultural nuances, respectful greetings, exchanging business cards with both hands, discussing details in a polite, roundabout fashion. By late afternoon, I was exhausted. I decided to head back to the hotel to recharge. I arrived in the lobby, tie loosened, feeling a wave of relief at the thought of a soft bed. Then I saw him again, seated on a velvet sofa near an antique statue. This time, he wore a crisp linen shirt and dark trousers, a subtle yet sophisticated look. He was reading what appeared to be an English newspaper, with an air of quiet concentration. My pulse quickened. Maybe it was the novelty of being alone in a foreign land, or maybe it was the graceful way he held himself, but I felt drawn to him as if by a magnetic pull. I tried to walk by without staring, but his eyes caught mine once more. He offered a nod, a courtesy in line with the polite traditions I'd observed. In my country, nodding to a stranger might be casual, but here, it felt almost intimate. I mustered the courage to speak. "Long day?" I asked, my voice sounding braver than I felt. He folded the newspaper, set it aside, and looked at me with a faint smile. "You could say that," he replied, in nearly flawless English. "And yours?" I shrugged. "Work meetings, traffic jams, a bit overwhelming." He chuckled softly. "Delhi does that. My name is Vihan, by the way." "Ethan," I said, extending my hand a bit too quickly. He accepted the handshake, and I noticed how warm his grip was against mine. It lingered maybe half a second longer than normal. Or perhaps I imagined it. The next moment, a group of people passed by, talking loudly, and the moment shattered. I felt a surge of disappointment, but Vihan stood, tucking the newspaper under his arm. "I was just about to get some tea in the lounge," he said. "Would you like to join me?" I hesitated, recalling that I was in no mood for socializing after such a long day. Yet the pull was irresistible. "Sure," I answered. "I'd love to." We walked together to the hotel lounge, a quiet area with velvet curtains and soft lamps casting a golden hue. We found a small table in a corner, away from prying eyes. A server approached, and Vihan recommended I try kahwa tea, a Kashmiri specialty. I followed his advice. The aroma of saffron and cardamom soon rose from the delicate cup in front of me, and it felt almost magical. For the first few minutes, we stuck to casual pleasantries. Where we were from, why I'd come to India, what he did for a living. He told me he worked with an architectural firm specializing in the restoration of historical monuments. That explained the refined way he carried himself, like someone in tune with tradition and beauty. At one point, I mentioned how stunning his kurta had been the day before, and his eyes flickered with amusement. "You remember what I was wearing?" he asked, his voice teasingly gentle. I blushed, stumbling over an excuse. "Well, it was, rather striking." He smiled, saying nothing, but his gaze held a warmth that made my heart pound. Soon, our conversation drifted beyond small talk. We discussed the nuances of life in India, from arranged marriages to the clash between modern aspirations and traditional family structures. I shared snippets of my life back in the States, how I'd grown up in a conservative town where being different wasn't exactly celebrated. He listened intently, nodding at the similarities we both faced in societies that expected us to fit neatly into certain roles. After an hour or so, we realized it was getting late. I had an early meeting the next day, and he had to visit a construction site at sunrise. We walked back to the lobby together, and I felt a subtle tension thrumming in the air, like a charged wire. When we reached the elevator, he glanced around, ensuring no one was looking. Then, in the privacy of that brief silence, his hand brushed mine, barely a touch, but enough to make my breath catch. "Thank you for the tea," I managed to say. "I'd love to continue our conversation sometime." He inclined his head, that polite gesture I was starting to associate with him. "I would like that," he said quietly. "Very much." The elevator arrived. We parted ways with one last exchange of glances that felt more intimate than a kiss, and I went to my room, pulse racing. Over the next few days, I saw Vihan whenever our schedules allowed, though it was never enough to satisfy the magnetic tension between us. Sometimes, I spotted him in the lobby, chatting in Hindi with hotel staff. Other times, we met for a quick cup of tea or coffee in a discreet corner, discussing everything from art to religion to the best places to find authentic street food. With each conversation, the connection deepened. Something about him resonated with me, his blend of tradition and open-mindedness, the way he could be both reserved and quietly passionate. One evening, after my meetings ended early, I gathered my courage and texted him. We'd exchanged numbers in a casual, feel free to message me if you need any local tips, kind of way. My hands trembled as I typed, suggesting maybe we could go out and see the city lights. His response was immediate, "I'm free. Meet me in the courtyard in 20 minutes." My heart soared. I changed into a more comfortable outfit, jeans and a light, long-sleeved shirt, and headed downstairs. The courtyard was softly lit by ornate lanterns, and a gentle breeze rustled the palm fronds. I spotted Vihan near a stone bench, wearing a simple black kurta and a pair of fitted trousers. He looked effortlessly elegant, as usual. "Have you eaten yet?" he asked, stepping closer. "Not really," I admitted. He smiled. "Come on. I know a place." We slipped out of the hotel, trying not to draw too much attention. After a short walk, Vihan hailed an autorickshaw. The ride was bumpy, weaving through the chaotic traffic, with horns blaring and neon signs flashing on every corner. I clung to the metal bar, secretly relishing how Vihan's knee pressed against mine whenever we hit a pothole. He looked amused by my wide-eyed fascination with the city at night. It felt exhilarating to be so close in a space that demanded a certain intimacy, even if it was unspoken. He took me to a small, family-run eatery located down a narrow alley. Inside, the air was thick with the aroma of spices and hot oil. We found a table in the corner. Vihan ordered a variety of dishes, paneer tikka, butter chicken, garlic naan, and a cooling raita. I savored each bite, occasionally coughing at the spiciness. He laughed and ordered me a sweet lassi to help with the heat. Between mouthfuls, we talked about the complexities of living in India as someone who wasn't strictly following the traditional path. Vihan explained that his family expected him to settle down, marry a woman from a good background, and eventually carry on the lineage. He was the only son, and the weight of those expectations felt like an anchor tied around his neck. At the same time, he loved his homeland deeply and couldn't imagine leaving it for good. That struggle, he confessed, had led him to keep a low profile with regard to his personal life. I confided in him about my own upbringing, a conservative household where my father thought the only path to success was through manly pursuits like hunting or sports, neither of which appealed to me. I told him how, when I finally came out as gay at 21, my parents reacted with confusion and subtle disapproval that took years to soften. He listened intently, empathy shining in his eyes. We lingered in that little eatery until the owner started turning off lights. As we stepped out into the deserted alley, a hush enveloped us. The city seemed far away, reduced to distant honks and glimmers of light. A single street lamp cast a weak glow on the cracked pavement. Vihan paused, turning to look at me. In that silent moment, something in his expression told me he felt it too, that urgent, undeniable pull we'd been dancing around all week. Without a word, he raised a hand to my cheek. It was a gentle gesture, almost reverent. My heart thundered in my chest. Then, very softly, he leaned in and brushed his lips against mine. A mere whisper of a kiss, but it ignited my entire body like a flash of lightning. I closed my eyes, inhaling his scent, a faint mix of sandalwood, soap, and spice from dinner. He pressed a bit closer, and the kiss deepened, filling my veins with a heady rush of warmth and longing. It lasted only a few seconds, but felt like an eternity suspended in the quiet darkness. He pulled back, eyes shining with a mixture of excitement and caution. We should go, he whispered, glancing around as if someone might appear out of nowhere. My heart still hammered, but I nodded, understanding the risk. India could be complicated, especially for two men kissing on a public street at night. We quickly hailed another autorickshaw and headed back to the hotel, hands occasionally brushing against each other, exchanging quick smiles whenever the driver was distracted by the road. From that night on, everything changed. The days turned into a blur of stolen moments, a soft touch in the elevator, a quick text message to arrange a secret meeting, an affectionate brush of shoulders in the hotel corridor. We would spend hours talking in hushed tones about anything and everything, but always aware of the lines we had to tread carefully. Vihan was discreet, not because he was ashamed, but because he knew the cultural repercussions if we were too open. I, too, realized how real the danger could be. One careless moment could bring him trouble, not just socially, but even legally in certain contexts. Sometimes I felt guilty, wondering if I was complicating his life. Then he'd look at me with such tenderness, reminding me that the choice was his to make. I'd never felt so powerfully connected to someone in such a short span of time. Our backgrounds were vastly different, but in that difference, we found a shared yearning, to love without fear, without boundaries. One evening, we arranged to meet on the rooftop terrace of my hotel. It wasn't officially open to guests, but I discovered a flight of stairs leading up there. I texted him, 8 p.m. Top floor. Door by the laundry closet. My heart drummed with nervousness as I waited. At precisely 8, I heard footsteps and saw him appear through the narrow doorway. The skyline of Delhi sprawled out around us, twinkling with a million lights. The air was cooler up there, carrying the distant hum of traffic. We stood side by side, gazing at the city, a mix of ancient domes and modern skyscrapers. After a while, he turned to me, lips curving into a gentle smile. I couldn't help it. I leaned in and kissed him, letting the city lights bear witness to that moment. It felt both exhilarating and terrifying to be so exposed. But up there, above it all, I thought maybe we could pretend for a second that we were free from judgment. We talked in whispers, arms entwined. Vihan told me about the first time he realized he was different, in a boarding school far from home. He spoke of sneaking glances at a friend who made his heart race, but never daring to speak the truth out loud. I told him about my disastrous attempts at dating back home, how I'd never really clicked with anyone, and how I worried that I was somehow destined to always be on the outside looking in. He squeezed my hand, telling me softly that I was wrong. That maybe, for both of us, the world had bigger plans. But even in those precious moments, reality loomed. My work would wrap up in a few days, and then I'd be expected to fly back to the States. Vihan had his job, his family, and the life he'd built here in India. As the departure date crept closer, an ache grew inside me. I didn't want to leave him behind, to go back and pretend that nothing had happened, that my heart hadn't been cracked open in a way I never thought possible. The night before my flight, he invited me to his apartment. He'd been hesitant at first, worried about neighbors and prying eyes, but there was no time left for half measures. I remember climbing 4 flights of stairs in an older building, heart pounding from more than just physical exertion. The apartment was small but cozy, worn rugs, shelves filled with architectural books, a corner where a statue of Ganesh rested beside an incense holder. It smelled faintly of sandalwood, just like him. He made us chai in a small kitchen, the air thick with steam and anticipation. We sat on a low couch, knees touching, sipping carefully from the hot cups. Neither of us knew how to broach the subject of my imminent departure. Finally, he set his cup down. "You leave tomorrow," he said quietly, as if stating an irrefutable fact. I nodded, throat tight. "Yeah. I don't want to." He took a shaky breath. "I wish I could follow you. But my mother, she's unwell, and I'm the only one she has." My father passed away years ago. If I abandon her now, my extended family will never forgive me. He looked torn, a swirl of emotions playing across his face, love for his family, love for his country, and something deeper that he felt for me, a newcomer who'd stepped into his life and rearranged everything. I reached for his hand, lacing my fingers through his. I don't want you to abandon anything. But I also don't want this to end, I whispered. He lowered his gaze. Neither do I. But what if it's impossible? I gently tilted his chin so that he'd meet my eyes. I don't believe it's impossible. Hard, maybe. But not impossible. There's video calls, messages, visits. I can come back. You can come visit me on a tourist visa. Maybe we'll find a way to be together without burning your bridges here. He let out a long exhale, and then, with a trembling hand, he pulled me closer until our foreheads touched. My entire body felt alive, every nerve brimming with an urgent mix of hope and sorrow. That evening stretched into night. We shared a meal he prepared, simple dal, rice, and roti. The flavors were comforting, and yet every bite was tinged with the knowledge that our time was almost up. After dinner, we moved back to the couch, leaning against each other while an old ceiling fan creaked overhead. He put on a piece of soft, traditional Indian music, and I rested my head on his shoulder, absorbing the melody into my bones. At some point, the conversation fell away, replaced by gentle touches that spoke louder than any words could. He kissed me, and I kissed him back, losing myself in the taste of his lips, the soft texture of his hair, the warmth of his skin. It wasn't just lust, it was the ache of two souls clinging to a fleeting moment, trying to stretch it into eternity. When dawn approached, he insisted on driving me back to my hotel so I could pack. We rode in silence, hands clasped on the center console. As the first rays of sunlight tinted the sky in pale pinks and oranges, the city stirred to life around us, vendors setting up stalls, prayer calls echoing from distant mosques, the hum of daily routine beginning anew. But for us, it was the end of something that had barely begun. He parked a short distance from the hotel entrance, not wanting to arouse suspicion. We turned to face each other, exhaustion and heartbreak etched into our features. I squeezed his hand, searching for the right words. "I'll write, I'll call," I said. "I'll do whatever it takes." He nodded, swallowing hard. "Me too. Promise me you won't forget." "How could I forget?" I said, my voice cracking. I leaned across the seat and kissed him, one final, lingering press of our lips. Then I tore myself away, opened the door, and slipped out into the early morning light. Each step toward the hotel felt like walking on shards of glass. Behind me, his car engine started, and I stopped for a second, wanting to turn around. But I didn't. I couldn't bear the sight of him driving away. Later that day, I flew home with a heavy heart. The memories of those secret meetings, stolen kisses, and shared dreams looped in my mind, refusing to fade. Back in the States, everything felt oddly dull and colorless. My friends noticed my distraction, asked if I was okay. I never found the right way to explain what had happened. How do you convey the intensity of a brief yet profound connection, thousands of miles away? For weeks, Vihan and I texted constantly. Every morning, I woke up to find his messages, describing the sunrise over the Yamuna River or how his mother was doing better. I sent him photos of my life, the coffee shop I frequented, the local park in fall colors, my messy office desk. In those digital exchanges, we tried to stitch together the distance, to keep alive the thread that bound us. But the hurdles were real. Family obligations weighed on him, and his culture demanded he tread carefully. My own life in the States grew busier, with new deadlines and work responsibilities. We attempted video calls, though the time difference made it complicated. When we finally managed to talk face-to-face through a phone screen, my heart lurched at seeing his familiar smile, but the longing that followed was like a punch to the gut. We both knew that months could pass before we could see each other again, if we were lucky. Despite the challenges, we held on to hope. We discussed possible plans. Could he get a temporary transfer to his firm's office in New York or Chicago? Could I find a position in Delhi? Each idea was met with optimism, but also overshadowed by bureaucracy, visas, and financial realities. Yet neither of us was ready to give up. One chilly winter evening, as I was finalizing a spreadsheet at work, my phone buzzed with an incoming call from India. I picked up, hearing Vihan's voice trembling on the other end. His mother's health had taken a turn for the worse, and the doctors feared the worst. My chest tightened at the thought of what he was going through, and how helpless I was half a world away. I wanted to be there for him, hold his hand, comfort him in person. Instead, I could only whisper words of reassurance through the phone. Over the next few days, I barely slept, waiting for updates, praying she'd pull through. By some miracle, she stabilized. Vihan told me how, in her hospital bed, she'd taken his hand and said, "Find what makes you happy, my son. Life is too short." He nearly broke down telling me that her acceptance, even if partial, meant more to him than he could put into words. And all I wanted was to hold him, to be part of the life he was clinging to. Months dragged on, but through countless messages, calls, and sleepless nights, something grew between us that was more than just an infatuation. We hadn't even known each other a full year, yet our bond felt tempered by every obstacle we faced. Eventually, we began planning. If all went well with his mother's health, Vihan could arrange a month-long sabbatical from his work to come visit me in the States. He wanted to see where I lived, meet my friends, and possibly, if he dared, share a small glimpse of our relationship with my more accepting relatives. That's where we stand today, on the brink of a reunion we've fantasized about in countless messages. My heart races at the thought of picking him up at the airport, of seeing him step through the arrival's gate with that poised stride, scanning the crowd until our eyes meet once again. Of course, we both worry about how he'll adapt to my culture, how his family might react if they discover how deep this connection goes. We don't pretend that everything will be easy, but we hold on to the hope that love, real, resilient love, can transcend the borders that humans invented. Even now, as I type these words, I'm reminded of how that very first glance in the hotel lobby changed the course of my life. Who would have guessed that a tall stranger in an embroidered kurta, standing in a grand old hotel in Delhi, would captivate me so completely? We come from worlds that sometimes seem incompatible, shaped by different social norms and expectations. Yet we've found in each other a spark that refuses to die. And maybe that's the beauty of it, how two hearts can recognize a shared rhythm beneath all the noise of culture and tradition. We've learned that it's not about pretending our differences don't exist, but about honoring them, understanding them, and finding ways to weave them into something richer. It's about having the courage to stand at the crossroads of two worlds and decide that, no matter how complicated, love is worth fighting for. If you followed this story to the end, thank you for letting me share it. I never thought I'd open up about something so personal and so filled with uncertainty. But I want people to know that these kinds of connections, unexpected, cross-cultural, and sometimes perilous, do happen. They can be messy and thrilling and heartbreaking all at once. And if you're lucky enough to find such a connection, I believe you owe it to yourself and to that other person to give it the best chance you can. So, as for what happens next, well, that's a story still unfolding. Maybe Vihan will step off that plane and everything will feel as natural as breathing, or maybe we'll stumble through new obstacles. But there's a quiet determination in both of us to keep going, to keep choosing each other, no matter how many miles lie between us, no matter how many cultural barriers try to stand in our way. If you want to hear more about this journey, how it evolves, what triumphs and struggles lie ahead, let me know in the comments. And if you liked this story, give it a thumbs up, share it with anyone who might appreciate a reminder that love can appear in the most improbable corners of the world, and subscribe to stay tuned. Because love, like the winding roads of Delhi or the open highways of America, has a way of surprising us when we least expect it. And who knows? Maybe the best parts of this story are yet to come.